In this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and work on Illustrator Classroom and Book Chapter 11, which is creating posters to using brushes to create a poster. We're working out of the 2018 book, but I am using Creative Suite 2019 just in case anything looks different. So let's go ahead and take a peek at what we're creating today. We're creating quite a few elements, the borders, the clouds, just choosing a lot of different elements in order to create a cool poster. So let's go ahead and do a file open and go grab that start file. Let's do a file, save as, first initial, last name, underscore, CIAB. Let's do Illustrator, CIAB, chapter 11, and save it as an Illustrator file. Make sure you keep track of where you're saving it, and push save. And we're going to say OK. So we're going to use quite a few brushes today when we are working on this assignment. So let's go ahead and go to Window and open up Brushes. Within Brushes, we have to use our list view, which is our hamburger menu, and it lets us determine which brushes we're actually going to look at. So for right now, we want to go ahead and only use our calligraphy brushes. So let's go ahead and do Show Calligraphy Brushes and turn all the other brushes that you might have on off. So the only things you should have are your calligraphy brushes. And let's go ahead and tell it to be a list view so we can see what all of those different brushes are. Alright, so from there, let's go ahead and come over here to our selection tool. And the first thing we're going to do is change this pink line. Let me make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to view fit artboard window so you can see a little bit better. We're going to make that pink line into more of a border line on the ship itself. So we're going to grab our selection tool, hit the first one, we're going to hit shift and grab the other one as well so we can do both of them at the same time. So we want to use a brush instead of a shape to add the border to that. So let's go ahead and go over to our properties and our stroke, or let's go ahead and change our brush to the 5 flat. So change it to the 5 flat. And we want to apply it to that pink path. Let's change our stroke to 6 points. So right here where our stroke is 1. You go ahead and hit the up arrows and grab it, hit it to 6. And now because we chose the flat one, we're going to get flat ends. Notice what would happen if I did the round one. Notice I get round ends, which don't necessarily work. So I want the flat one for sure. And I want to make sure that they're not pink anymore. So instead of stroke color being pink, I want to change it to white. I'm going to go ahead and do escape to make that swatches go away. And let's go ahead and go to select and deselect. Now we want to go ahead and give this a little bit more of a shadow look. If you notice, the right side of the ship's got a little bit darker. So let's use our selection tool. Looks like I double clicked. Just select one time. And let's go ahead and on our stroke, let's grab the second from the right, the one that ends with K equals 10, and turn it to just a little bit of a shadow to make it match that right side of the ship. Let's go do a file or select. Let's do a deselect and do a file save. Alright, so we've played with part of it so far. Next thing we're going to do is draw with the Paintbrush tool. So we're going to go ahead and make sure we have nothing selected. Next thing we're going to play with is this water. So let's go ahead and grab the water shape. So with our selection tool, we're going to hit the water shape. With the water shape selected, it's going to go in our layers panel and go ahead and select that layer for us so we know which one we're working on. So we know we're getting that sub layer. So let's go ahead and now do is deselect because we're on the right layer, but we don't necessarily want to affect that shape. Let's go ahead and grab our paintbrush tool. With our paintbrush tool, we're going to open up our brushes library. If you have to go to a window and brushes, you can open it back up again. And we're going to come down here to the brushes library. It looks like books down here at the bottom. And we want to come down here to artistic, and we want the artistic calligraphic, which is, calligraphic, whatever you want to say. And within that one, we want to go ahead and choose our list view. So go here and go to list view in case you have thumbnail. We want list. List makes it a little bit easier to make sure you grab the one you want. And you want 50 points flat. So that's going to go ahead and add that to your brushes menu over here. And we're going to go ahead and close that because we don't need to add any other menus, anything else from that one. So we're going to go ahead and create some waves here at the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is we want our fill to be none. We want to make sure our stroke is kind of this dark blue. It's kind of the purple one down here at the bottom. And we want our stroke to be 1 point. So now when we bring our paintbrush, or just to escape, so we bring our paintbrush over here, you'll notice our paintbrush has a little asterisk next to it. That means we're about to paint a new path. So the first thing we want to do, it's fine to color out of the lines on this, because if you color just within the lines, notice that you get strange start and stop points. So I'm going to undo all those. So I'm going to go, I want to add a wave right here below the bottom of the boat. So I'm going to start outside and go and drag it across. So let's go ahead and add a few more. Play with it. You're going to add a whole bunch of different waves, and we can go through and play with these later. So I'll go ahead and add a couple of dark blue ones. So once you've got those, let's go ahead and grab our selection tool. With our selection tool, let's go ahead and click on this first one that we drew. So I did kind of some weird things here. I might not necessarily like what I've got here. So let's go ahead, grab our paintbrush, and with our selection tool, I can actually pick up and continue that path that we'd already started. So I can drag it, I can change it. So let's do it one more time. And my paintbrush, I'm going to grab. So you see it's does not have that new path. We're actually collected onto and added onto the one we had before. So I've got my selection tool. I'm going to grab my paintbrush. I'm going to go ahead and add on to the one I had before. So you can continue past, say you don't like something that you did along the way. You can also do a few other things. If we do command or hit control or command as you select these, you can switch between the paintbrush and selection without having to go up here and grab those individually. Alright, so let's go ahead and play with a few more things. Let's do a file, deselect, and a control S to save what we've got so far. Let's go ahead and double click on the paintbrush tool. That's going to give us a few other options. We want to go ahead and make sure our fidelity is pulled all the way to smooth, and we want to go ahead and put keep selected, and we're going to hit OK. So now we're going to get a slightly different box. Oh, I didn't want to do that. We're going to go ahead and change our swatch over to medium blue. So our stroke, we're going to grab the second one in, the medium blue. And let's make it a little bit skinnier. Let's go to the 0.5. And let's go ahead and add some light blue paths to our ocean that we have so far. So there's no right or wrong way to do that. So see how I got this one a little bit short here. I can control click it and then grab it and drag it on a little bit farther. Okay, so then I've got that, and I want to go ahead and keep just drawing until you're happy with what you've got there. So let's go ahead and double click and turn off this keep selected. So keep selected made sure that whatever we did last was still selected. So it's just kind of one of those extra options. Let's go select, deselect, and do a control S to save what we've got as far as our blue lines go, our light blue lines go. So what happens when we want to edit a brush? Let's go ahead and go to this brushes panel. We've got the 50 point flat, and let's go ahead and double click on the actual thumbnail for it, not the name, and it's going to let you change it. So we're going to go ahead and change this a little bit. Let's change it to, instead of 50 point flat, we're going to make it 30 point. And we're going to change it to an angle of 0. And we're going to choose fixed for our size instead of random. And a roundness of about 5% and a size of 30. All right, when we're happy with that, we go say OK. It's going to say OK, apply to strokes. So now look what if you did that, it go ahead and changed all the strokes that you had and change that. So we don't necessarily want to do that. So I want to go ahead, let's change, I'm going to do it one more time and change it to 30 points. Let's go ahead and paint that back at 0. Fixed angle, 30 points. And let's say OK. And this time say leave strokes. So that way we're not going to change anything that's already in there. So you have an opportunity to go through and change things both ways. All right, so let's go ahead and grab a new color. So our stroke is going to go ahead and be the light blue. And let's make it 1 point. Oops, say OK. And add a few more waves in there. So it's up to you. See, you've got kind of a different brush going on. All right, when we're happy with that, let's go ahead and do a select. We don't have anything selected, so we're good. So let's go ahead, undo, and do Control S and save what we've got so far. So let's go ahead and play with our selection tool and figure out how to remove a brush stroke. So if you notice, we've got our cloud here, and our cloud's got kind of a funky white stroke to it, which might not like. So let's go ahead and click on the cloud. And if you come here to the bottom on the brushes panel, you get this kind of one that's got a X almost, so it's remove brush stroke. So it's going to go ahead and take that brush stroke off. And we want to go ahead and make sure we set that stroke weight to 0. So now we don't have any brush stroke weight there. Let's do a select, deselect, and a Control S to save. All right, so let's go ahead and learn how to use the art brushes. Art brushes generally are a little more fun, sometimes have some different looks and feels to them. So let's go to our brushes panel, go up to our hamburger menu. We want to show the art brushes. So make sure everything but the art brushes is turned on. So you say we've got basic, charcoal, and divider right now. So we want to add a few more in. Let's grab our library here at the bottom. At our library at the bottom, we want artistic, and we want artistic paintbrush. And from artistic paintbrush, make sure that you have, I turned that off. Artistic paintbrush. All right, let's go ahead and make sure your list view is turned on so you can see what your different choices are. You can go ahead and make this bigger so you can see more. And I want to choose brush number 3. So I see brush number 3 now is now part of my brushes that I have here. And that's all I need. So I'm going to go ahead and say close that. All right, so now I want my fill color. I'm going to grab my brush. I want to make sure that my fill color is set to none, and that my stroke color is white. And let's go ahead and make sure that I am going to paint it in the right place. So let's go to my layers panel. And within layers, I want to make sure that where I'm painting is on the right layer. So let's go ahead and click spray or tree so that we're actually painting on the right panel. And let's come back into properties. So let's grab our paintbrush that we've now set to this those things, and we're going to go ahead and we're adding a little bit of spray at the front, so a little bit of white. So let's go ahead, we're going to drag, click, and drag kind of along the bottom of the boat to the left and the bottom of the row to the right. If you don't like it, you can always do a Control Z and undo and repaint it until you get kind of the stroke you're looking for. If you're finding you don't like the way they're coming together, let's see, maybe they don't touch, you want them to, go ahead, grab another stroke. Oops. Till you get kind of the look and feel you want. So play with that one until you get the splash that you think looks cool. All right, when you're happy with that, do File and Save. So we can also create brushes out of raster images. So remember, raster images are the ones that are created by math. So let's go ahead and make sure nothing is selected. Let's do a File, a Select, and Deselect. Make sure nothing's selected. I'll go ahead and close my layers for now. I'm going to do a File and a Place. And I'm going to go ahead into my 11 folder and go grab that one that says Tree. You want to make sure the one that says Link is not selected. So don't select Link and say Place. And we're going to go ahead and just place that over here on the artboard for now. So I'm going to slide over. You can use your space bar, kind of slide over a little bit. Alright, so we've got our image placed. Let's go ahead and grab our selection tool and select our tree. Now we want to go into Window and Brushes. And we want to come down to the bottom to the Post-it note because we want to create a new brush. The new brush type we want to do is an art brush. And we're going to say OK. It's going to say, what do you want to name this? I'm going to name it Palm Tree. And I don't want to mess with anything else, so let's go ahead and say OK. So now I can use this tree as a brush. So let's go ahead and do a View, Fit Artboard and Window. And I actually want to apply that tree to this line right here. So let's go ahead and make sure we grab our palm tree. And let's double click it. And let's do something else with it first. So let's go ahead and click on our path. That is the black line. And hit the one called Palm Tree. And you see that it will actually snap to that line. Now what if we want to change it just a little bit? We can edit it. So let's go double click into our palm tree. And here where we want stretch between guides. Just right down in here. We want the start to be 5 inches and the end to be 6. So notice we're playing with a little bit. We want to flip across selected. All right. And then we're going to say OK. So we've edited that. We want to go ahead and say apply to strokes this time. So it's actually going to apply to that stroke, unlike what we wanted to do with the ocean here down below. All right, let's go ahead and go to our word opacity over here in our properties panel. And instead of normal, let's go ahead and drop it down to multiply and see how we get kind of a slightly faded look to our tree, which is a little bit better. We like it. So let's do Select, Deselect, and do File and Save. Alright, so let's go ahead and play with some bristle brushes in order to create some of the smoke. So let's go ahead and go to our brushes panel. In brushes, we want to go ahead and do our hamburger menu. We want to show the bristle brushes. We want to hide the art brushes. So we get this one called Mop. So we're going to play with this one called Mop. Let's go ahead and double click the thumbnail. And we're going to go ahead and make sure it's called a round fan. We want our size to be 7 millimeters, so a little bit bigger. We want our bristle length to be 150. Our bristle density to come down to 20. We want our bristle thickness to be 75. Our paint opacity to be 75. And our stiffness to be 50. And we're going to go ahead and say OK. So now what we're going to do is play with those clouds to make them a little bit more wispy. We're going to make them into smoke. So let's grab our selection tool. With our selection tool, we're going to go ahead and grab the smoke shape. We're going to come down to our tools panel, and there's 3 little circles at the bottom. You want the one that says draw inside. So we're going to go ahead and draw inside that shape. So we want to, with that still selected, we want to switch that fill color to none because we don't want to have any fill color. And we want to select and deselect. Oh, undo. Oh, I changed ones, that's why. I went to the end one. Alright, so select and deselect. Now notice we still have our dotted corners. You have to have those. We're going to grab our Paintbrush tool, and let's go ahead and make sure it's on our mop. Say OK. And I'm going to go ahead and start painting. Let's use kind of a light gray with our mop. And I'm going to paint the smoke. Now notice, because we said paint inside that shape, you can go outside that cloud, but you're still getting that shape. So go ahead and kind of make your smoke fill that shape however you like. Alright, so now you've got your smoke shape. So now we want to clean up the shape a little bit. So if we notice, we've got a few other things going on, and we want to not necessarily have this shape have a stroke around it to make it kind of so obvious. So let's go ahead and do a, well, it's still selected. Let's go ahead and do a view and do outline. And you're going to see all the outlines, all the different paths that are going on. Let's do select, and let's go object. And we want to go ahead and do bristle brush strokes. So we want it to only select the strokes that were made with that bristle brush that we just used. Let's go to object and come down to group. So it's going to make them one thing. And then we're going to go to view. And we want the GPU preview. So we see that we only have those individual things together. Alright, now we want to go to the draw normal here at the bottom. Alright, and we're going to do select and deselect. So we've now created a group of those bristle brushes so we don't play with those. So let's go ahead and double click on the smoke to enter the isolation mode. If you notice here, we've got no fill, but we do have a stroke selected. So under stroke, let's go ahead and choose none. Oh, we forgot to select it. Oh, other one. There we go. Now none. So now we have the shape, but we don't necessarily have the outline. So I'm going to hit escape, and now I just have that nice view, which is totally what I want it to be. So let's do a control. Let's go to our layers panel, and let's turn off the one called spray and tree, and let's do a select. Let's do a deselect, make sure there's nothing else there, and do a control S to save what we have so far. Alright, so now what we're going to do is put some windows on our boat without having to draw 10 jillion little tiny circles. So let's go ahead and do a view, fit artboard on window in case you can't see the whole thing. Let's go to our brushes panel. So I'm going to close this one. Hit our brushes panel. This time I want pattern brushes. So show pattern brushes, and I go ahead and close my bristle brushes. Unfortunately, you can't turn those on and off super easy. And you're going to notice that we have a brush called Windows here, which is pretty cool. So with the selection tool, we're going to go ahead and shift select these two lines. So I'm going to select this one, escape, select that one, and I'm going to shift and I'm going to select the second one. Why is it doing that? Alright, select the first one, shift select the second one. Alright, so now I have both of them. So now I want to go ahead and go to the window pattern brush, and notice how it's automatically going to put those windows on just right for me, which is perfect, exactly what I want. So let's go to select and deselect. So now I want to make the windows on the bottom just a little bit different. So I'm going to select just this bottom row of windows, with my selection tool. I'm going to go into the options, which is looks like the little clipboard next to the brushes over on your properties panel. And there I want to go ahead and scale it to 110%. So I want to make those windows just slightly bigger. So if you turn your preview on and off, you can kind of see what's going on. And we're going to say OK. All right, so a few other things we can do. We have played with some bristle brushes, we've played with some pattern brushes. Now let's go ahead and create our own pattern brush. So let's make sure we've got select, deselect, make sure nothing's saved, and Control S to save what we have so far. So let's go ahead and look at View, and let's come down here to the very bottom. This is Pattern Objects. Now these are objects that we can make patterns out of. We want to go ahead and grab this one that looks kind of like a rope, which is below the life preserver. So now on the panel, the brushes panel, we want to go ahead and do thumbnail view so we can kind of see what's going on there. And each segment is going to correspond to their pattern. So we see we've got one that's kind of the windows that we just had. So now we're going to go ahead and make a new one. So at the bottom of our brushes, we're going to hit our post-it. It says New Brush. And it is a new pattern brush. And we'll say OK. So now you'll notice we've got a few different kinds of options when it comes up here. The first thing we're going to do is call it border. So that's good. Under spacing options, we've got what is going to go on with this border. So let's go ahead and take a peek at our box here. Look what happens if you change it to pompadour. Notice how that pattern repeats over and over again. You don't necessarily want that for this look, but I did want you to kind of see what it can do. All right, so now we have to say, what do you want it to do when it comes to the corners? What happens when you turn a corner? So right now, let's go ahead and do auto between, which means go ahead and blend that from one place to another to make it the most smooth transition possible. And let's go ahead and say OK. So now I have this pattern established. So I'm going to go to my View, Fit Artboard and Window, and we're going to go ahead and apply this to the white border. So I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to grab just the white. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to take that brush and hit that pattern that I've got right there. So it works out very, very well. And I want my stroke to be none. Nope. No, I don't. Undo. I had it right. All right, so we're going to apply that pattern brush. So if I go ahead and select, deselect, notice how it made that nice little corner for me each time I went around. So what if I want to go ahead and add that life preserver to these corners? Well, I could go up and drag it up each time, but I can also add it to my pattern. So let's go ahead and make sure we do a Control S and say what we've got so far. Let's go to Window and grab Swatches. All right, so with my swatches, I can actually add pattern objects to it. So I'm going to grab my selection tool, go grab this life preserver. I'm going to drag it straight into my swatches, and you see now I have it as one of my swatch objects. So we can actually create that pattern relatively easy. So let's do select and deselect to make sure we are not holding on to that anymore. So let's go ahead and double click on that pattern. Oops, escape. Double click. All right, in there we want to go ahead and name the swatch corner. And that's the only thing we want to do. So we're going to hit, all right, it appears as done, and hit done. So we've got one called corner. So let's go ahead and go to our brushes panel and do window and brushes. And let's double click on this one. And instead of this gentle corner, let's go ahead and scroll down and grab our life preserver instead. So now it's going to go ahead and put that life preserver on anytime that we have a life preserver object. Now, we want to do a few other things. It's kind of a large life preserver, so we want to change it a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and change scale, and we're going to change it from 100% down to 70, so it gets a little bit smaller. And we're going to say OK. Now we want to go ahead and put apply to strokes, so it makes that change. And so now we get that small life preserver each time we do. So what does this actually mean? So if I were to take this path and apply this life preserver, notice that I don't get the life preservers on the ends because they don't necessarily have corners. So because it's not set as a corner, it won't do it. I'm going to do a Control Z and undo that one, so you can just kind of see what's going on. Let's go ahead and do a select, deselect, and a Control S to save. So we're going to go ahead and work with the Blob Brush. We are nearly through this project. Let's go ahead, and a regular brush is going to create a single path, where a Blob Brush is actually going to create some shapes for us. So we're going to play with our clouds here. Let's go ahead and go into our layers. And for now, let's go ahead and turn off the ship, so we don't see the ship, because we're going to play with this cloud area right here. So we want to make sure we're playing with it on the background layer. So switch that background to deselect. On our swatches panel, so we can go Window and Swatches. We want to go ahead and do our fill color as light blue. So it's about third one in. And we do not want a stroke. We do not need clouds with black borders. And that will be the ultimately become our shape. So below our paintbrush, if we click and hold, we get one called the Blob Brush. So let's go ahead and double click the Blob Brush, and your options are we want to keep selected as turned on. We want our size to be about 70 points. And we're going to go ahead and say OK. So we're going to position our pointer. We're going to draw a shape, but don't touch the other small shapes. So maybe you want kind of a fluffy cloud. You can go ahead and add to your cloud. So kind of your blob lets you make different kinds of shapes. So what you're doing is actually creating a closed shape. So maybe we want to merge our two shapes together. We want to make this one single shape. So let's go to Select and Deselect. And let's grab our Blob Brush. And we want to take and connect our one cloud to the other cloud with our Blob Brush and kind of merge those both together. So now they kind of look like a single cloud, which is pretty cool. And don't forget, if it's not perfect, your smoke is going to cover up a bunch of this, so don't freak out completely. Let's go ahead and do a select, deselect, and do a Control S to save. Now, what if you hate, hey, I hate how my cloud has this shape going on? You can actually fix it. Let's go ahead and go to the eraser tool and grab that eraser. Double click. Let's make the eraser about 40 points and say OK. And you can go ahead and let's make sure we select our cloud shape first. Now grab our eraser, and you can erase parts of that back out. Now maybe you want to put it back in. Go ahead, grab your Blob Brush, say OK, and put it back in. So you can go back and forth between your eraser and your Blob Brush to make that work for you. Alright, so let's go ahead and select and deselect. Let's go ahead and take a peek at what we've got all together. So let's go ahead to our layers and turn all of our layers on. And why am I not seeing the text? Oh, need to go into our text layers and actually turn on those. So say you didn't want it to say Mediterranean Cruise, you could go in and fix it at this point, seeing as you're going to use it as part of your advertisements later. So this is where you would go in and fix that. So it's beautiful, except we have kind of a mess. We have a lot of stuff sticking outside of our artboard. We might not necessarily want that. So let's go ahead and clip it. So on this one called Mask, let's go down to the bottom where it says Make or Release Clipping Mask. And notice it's going to clean up all those edges for you. So let's do Object, Show All. Except I think we've already done all that. Yep, we've already shown everything, so there's nothing hiding. Let's go ahead and undo that. And let's go ahead and do select, deselect if anything's selected, do a Control S, and you have saved this one. Don't forget you need to turn in zipped Adobe Illustrator packages. And that's all for Adobe Illustrator Classroom Red Book Chapter 11.